You're a Russian soldier on the front lines and you receive the order from your commander. It's time to go. You're heading into the kill zones to evade drones and try to infiltrate a Ukrainian position, where you'll be tasked with waiting and praying that backup comes before you're caught or killed. You know it's almost impossible that you'll make it back alive, but as you enter the kill zone, you see just how lethal Ukraine can be. You barely have your bearings before a drone descends. Just like that, you're done. You lasted no longer than an episode of The Simpsons, and you're not the only one. This is the reality of the Russian army today. Sign a contract, train for 10 days, and then die in 20 minutes. Welcome to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Your leader has already moved on to trying to sign up the next piece of cannon fodder. Russia's pro-war military bloggers have exposed it all, as they are raging against the complete waste of human life that Putin has created through his invasion. In a June 29th report, the Kyiv Post said that Russia's war bloggers are reporting that soldiers sent to the front lines in Ukraine are often surviving for about as long as it takes to watch the average sitcom, and it's all Putin's fault. The average life expectancy of a Russian assault soldier on the front line is 20 to 35 minutes, claims one post, which has been widely shared inside Russia. That alone shows you how desperate things have become for Putin's ground campaign. But it gets so much worse. It's not just how fast Russia's soldiers are dying that's become a problem, it's that they're dying without taking anywhere near enough Ukrainians with them. At least that's how Putin will see it. The New York Post reports that Russia is now suffering 8 casualties for every 1 that it's causing to Ukraine. The maths doesn't add up here. Sure, Russia has a manpower advantage over Ukraine, however Russia's population is about 4 times that of Ukraine. A massive difference, of course, but 4 times more potential soldiers doesn't mean much when you're losing 8 times more than your enemy. Something has to give, and it looks like it's going to be Russia's ability to carry out the types of assaults that Putin needs to gain ground in Ukraine. Soldiers are starting to take notice, and they're as angry as Russia's military bloggers. Internal frustrations are being triggered, with the most notable example coming from blogger and former Russian soldier Alexander Lunin. Earlier in June, he demanded a meeting with Putin to explain how the commanders he has assigned to the front are ordering their troops into suicide missions and torturing them if they refuse. The army will turn its weapons against the Kremlin if nothing was done about the problem, Lunin declared. Putin reacted in the most Putin way possible. Putin had Lunin arrested for his social media warning, and he hopes that will be the end of the problems. It won't be. Arresting a man who is trying to call out the many abuses in the Russian army isn't going to be enough to extend the 20-minute lifespans of the terrified patsies being ordered into the kill zones. It's Putin's ridiculous approach to this war, in which meat is supposed to overcome a drone army, that is part of the reason why this is all happening in the first place. Indeed, it's Ukraine's drones that are one of the major reasons why Russian soldiers last less time in the kill zones than pizzas spend being delivered. But there's a lot more to it than that. Putin has set these soldiers up to fail from the start. Let's talk about training. In their rants, Russia's military bloggers have pointed out that the assault troops getting killed so quickly might have stood a better chance if they had experienced anything even resembling appropriate training for the war zone that Russia was about to dump them in. The time from training ground to deployment is now between 10 days and 3 weeks, claims the same post that exposed how little time Russia's forces spend on the front before they die. This isn't an idle claim. There are Russian soldiers who say that this is precisely the amount of training that they received before they were sent to the fight. Ivan is one of those soldiers. Speaking to United 24 media in February, he said, "After all the medical checkups, they asked me if I was ready to go to the military base the day after tomorrow. They trained us for 5 days, we waited for another 5 days for a force rotation, and then we went to combat positions." What we see from Russia is a consistent degradation in the length and quality of its training, to the point where recruits barely know which way to point their rifles before they're sent out to the front. Any modern military will spend several weeks or months training a recruit, and will offer continued training upon deployment. Russia itself used to do a lot better, at least when it came to the time it spent preparing soldiers. Before 2013, new soldiers were trained for between 5 and 6 months. In 2013, that was cut to 3 months. It was shortened even more when Putin invaded Ukraine, though soldiers are still supposed to receive 192 hours of training under the Russian system. They aren't getting anywhere near that, and Russia is paying the price in its own blood on the battlefield. Presumably, Putin sees this as a good trade. But 10 days of training for 20 minutes of fighting is a ridiculous approach to warfare, and it would only be possible if Russia had a non-stop flow of recruits to send to the front to replace those that it's losing. Spoiler alert for later, Russia does not have a non-stop flow. What it does have is an increasing number of assaults, and that's another one of the reasons why its frontline soldiers are dying in 20 minutes or so. So determined is Putin that Russia can win the war just by going on the disorganized attack constantly that he is ordering a higher number of assaults than we've seen at any other point in 2026. According to the Odessa Journal, Russia increased its assaults by 37.5% in May, though it only managed to gain 14 square kilometers of Ukraine for all of that effort. The odds are the number of assaults being conducted in June has risen compared to May, and that assault volume will continue to rise throughout the summer due to the weather being as favorable as it's going to be for Putin's plans. Now, what do more assaults really mean for Russia right now? More opportunities for Ukraine's defenders to strike. At least when soldiers are hanging back behind the front, there are fewer chances for them to be killed. But when they're ordered into their death marches on the front, it's all over. Ukraine is always watching, drones are everywhere, and when Russian soldiers are being sent to fight, that just means that there are more targets to choose from for Ukraine. Speaking of drones, that brings us back to the first reason we mentioned for the pathetic lifespan of Russia's frontline soldiers. Ukraine's drones are more lethal now than they've ever been. Russia's military bloggers point to a war that has been completely transformed by drones as the main culprit behind the low lifespans of frontline soldiers. Putin is still bringing 2022 tactics to a 2026 fight, and Russia faces the same disadvantage that it's always faced, which is that it's the side that has to go on the offensive. The assaults, as damaging as they are to Russia, are also unavoidable. Ukraine is more than happy to hang back and let Russian soldiers throw themselves against the rocks, but that's always been the case. The biggest difference in 2026 is that it's not just drones along the front lines and a few kilometers beyond that are doing the damage. As the House Among the Laurels military blog points out, many of Russia's soldiers are being wounded or killed in the rear in 2026. A lot has already been said about Ukraine's Middle Strike campaign and how it's transformed the complexion of the Ukraine war this year. Now that Ukraine has access to a plentiful supply of drones that can strike 200 kilometers or more beyond the front, it's taking full advantage. Russian logistics are being shredded to pieces, which is key to Ukraine's strategy of isolating Crimea and cutting off support to frontline soldiers. Command centers, drone launch points, and ammunition depots are also being targeted, again limiting the support that frontline soldiers receive. But what often goes underreported is that troop gatherings behind the front are also being hit. That's what the House Among Laurels is complaining about. Russia can't even get away with preparing assaults anymore, never mind launching them. As soon as Ukraine gets a bead on where a troop gathering may be, it sends in the middle strike drones. Even if those drones aren't successful and the only thing that could stop them are the air defenses that happen to be at the gathering point, a message is sent that Ukraine knows exactly where the incoming soldiers are. Those who survive the attack in the rear will be tracked and killed on the front. Speaking of the front, we also can't ignore the fact that Ukraine has expanded massively on the kill zone strategy that it developed in 2025. In some areas of the front, those kill zones expand up to 50 kilometers of drone-infested territory, which are then followed up by the mid-strike drones. The whole concept of a kill zone is designed to create the type of casualty rate and low lifespans that we're seeing now. They aren't new ideas. For centuries, armies have been guiding enemies into zones where those enemies can be struck down with weapons. In the recent past, it would be artillery and rockets doing the job. Now it's drones, thousands of them. Some keeping a never-ending watch and others waiting to strike as soon as a soldier is spotted. Add those drones to other defenses such as barbed wire that slows soldiers down and anti-tank ditches and dragon's teeth to stop vehicles, and you get the makings of massacres. No wonder Russia's soldiers are lasting about 20 minutes. So Putin is going to do something about all of this, right? These are his country people who are dropping like flies in Ukraine, so he must have some ideas. If you think that, then you don't know Putin. But a quick side note before we go on, this is The Military Show, and we deliver this kind of insight every single week. Subscribe to the channel if you're getting value from our videos. For Putin to actively try to solve Russia's 20-minute dilemma, he would have to care about his soldiers. Does he? Of course not. The whole reason that Russia is suffering casualties as quickly and on such a scale is that Putin does not care one jot about the soldiers that he sends to the front. They're tools and nothing more to a callous man who is obsessed with his own legacy. We're not the only ones who say that. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha was saying the same thing a year ago in response to Putin's claim that any land on which a Russian soldier steps is Russian land. Putin does not care about Russian soldiers or their feet torn apart by Ukrainian drones. He is a mass murderer of his own people. He already disposed of 1 million Russian soldiers in a senseless bloodbath in Ukraine without achieving a single strategic goal. 1 million soldiers 2 million feet, Sabir raged. The numbers are about 1.4 million soldiers and 2.8 million feet a year later. US President Donald Trump has also expressed exasperation over Putin and his lack of concern about his soldiers, stating in June 2025, "Maybe he doesn't care. I'm starting to think he doesn't care. He's losing a lot of soldiers, just like Ukraine." For Putin, soldiers dying in 20 minutes doesn't matter at all. At least those soldiers absorbed a bullet, a drone, or some other form of Ukrainian ammunition. And besides, there's plenty more where they came from to allow Russia to keep on sending meat into the grinder until the grinder breaks down. Maybe you remember our spoiler from earlier. There is no non-stop flow. Putin needs to start caring about his soldiers having such low lifespans because that fact, coupled with the sheer scale of the Russian casualty count, is coming back to bite him. On the manpower front, Russian military bloggers are already pointing out that what we're seeing now is unsustainable, especially because Russia is getting practically nothing in terms of territory captures for its 20-minute men. The situation is such that in autumn there will either be peace or mobilization, claims the notes of a veteran Telegram channel, as the blogger advised conscription-aged men that now is the time to prepare an emergency backpack as they look to get off the Kremlin's radar. Indeed, Russian volunteer recruiting is faltering to the point where Putin can no longer afford to just write off the fact that his soldiers last mere minutes on the front. Despite offering massive signing bonuses of $80,000 along with up to $140,000 in debt relief, Russia is a long way behind its 2025 numbers when it comes to recruitment. According to CNN, Russian recruitment was down 20% during the first quarter of 2026 compared to the previous year. United 24 Media has an even more worrying figure for Putin. It says that contract soldier recruitment dropped massively, noting that Russia sent 1,708 contract soldiers to the front in April, followed by 1,378 in May. In both cases, that was about 1,000